Okay, good afternoon, folks. We'll start the meeting presently. Just as a note before we begin, those of you joining by Zoom, if you are going to address the committee, please make sure that you unmute your microphone. If you are attending without speaking, please make sure that you are muted. Those of you attending in person, if you are asked to address the committee or if you wish to address the committee, please proceed to the stand and turn on the microphone. It's so that we can broadcast to the others in the Zoom meeting. So I require a mover and seconder, please, for a resolution to convene as Committee of Adjustment for June the 12th, 2024 hearing. Moved by Lee, seconded by Greg. That the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby convenes at 4:01 p.m. on Wednesday, June the 12th, 2024. All in favor? And carried. So the Committee of Adjustment hereby convenes as a public meeting as per the Planning Act. Applicants and the public may speak at the meeting. When asked who wishes to speak to an application, please raise your hand, state your name and address, and direct all comments through me, the chair. Notice of decisions will be sent to applicants and to the public if requested. Only the prescribed persons per the Planning Act may appeal a decision or condition of approval within 20 days of a decision. I require a mover and seconder for the resolution to accept the agenda for today's meeting. Moved by Greg, seconded by Wibb. That the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby approves the agenda for the June 12th, 2024 hearing. All in favor? And carried. And one more time, a mover and seconder, please, for a resolution to accept the minutes from the previous meeting of the committee. Moved by Lee, seconded by Wibb. That the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby accepts as read and circulated the minutes of its last hearing, which took place on Wednesday, May the 8th, 2024. All in favor? And carried. I now asked the Committee of Adjustment members for disclosure of any pecuniary interest with respect to today's applications. Does anyone have any conflicts to declare? All right, none heard. Then we will move into applications. We have a fairly full roster today, so I will ask the Secretary Treasurer to introduce our first application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of minor variance application A-2024-0015-H Fort is to construct a two-slip boathouse with an upper story guest cabin on the subject lands. The applicants are requesting a variance for maximum boathouse length, maximum boathouse eave height, the definition of half-story, and definition of a dormer. No formal correspondence was received.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I will now ask if any of the applicants or agents wish to speak to this application.
Good afternoon. My name is Graham Smith. I'm an architect with Altius, specifically our architectural firm Sustain Design Architects. I'm representing as agent and architect Ms. Lindy Fort, who is here today. Also in attendance is my associate, Mike Letros.
Okay, welcome, sir. Is there anything you would like to say to the committee this afternoon?
Yes, I would. If I can get permission to share the screen, Mr. Chairman?
You may, yes. just keep it to the point, please. We have quite a full attendance this afternoon.
I'll do my best. So we are applying for a boathouse on the subject lands, 85 Topajoe Road. That is on the east side of Lake Joseph, just north of Hammer Bay. We are choosing a kind of mid-century modern language for this project. We have a main cottage that you can see, which is very high up on a cliff, and a boathouse below. And what we are trying to achieve is a complementary design of the boathouse and the cottage, particularly in this graceful, sweeping, curved roof design, which is quite unusual. There are 4 variances. I'm sorry, I'll go back a sec. One is for the depth of the boathouse. You can see that rather than the 36 by 36 foot square plan, we are doing a rectangular plan, which produces the exact same square footage on the lower level as what is permitted. Staff has recommended this variance, so if there are no objections or comments, I'll pass on this variance as it does meet all 4 tests without question. The 4th variance is the so-called reverse dormer. Staff also recommends that this be passed. We'll be talking a little bit about reverse dormers as we go through this presentation. And so again, if there are no questions, I will go with staff's recommendation that this one be passed. Which brings us to variances 2 and 3. And they both relate to height. Staff has treated them together, and so will I. They relate to the eave height on the north side of the boathouse, as well as the height of the enclosing walls of the upper story being higher than the 4-foot high wall that is the intent of the zoning bylaw. I'm going to kind of try to stick to feet and inches here because I believe most of us understand feet and inches more than meters, but I will flip-flop a little bit back and forth. You'll see there's a blue outline here, and that blue outline is the line of the mass and height of second-story boathouses typically approved in Seguin Township over the past 18 years. You'll see that they are substantially higher, up to 32 feet at the ridge. The 23-foot 2 or 6.7 meter median height is what is permitted in the bylaw. So you might be asking yourself why, if routinely approved boathouses are 9 feet taller than what we're asking for, why we need variances for height. And that's a very good question, and I'm going to unpack that, and you're going to have to give me some leeway on this. I'm going to make a kind of a bold statement here, and we need to understand the definitions in the zoning bylaw, what we're talking about. Building height, I've underlined the key elements, the median level between the eaves and the ridge, the eave height being obviously from the high water mark to the underside of the eave line, and the eave line being the lower edge of a roof deck. Dormer, we all know, it's a structure that sits on top of a roof. It contains windows and has its own roof that generally blends into the roof line. A recessed dormer here, I pointed out this definition because recessed dormers are explicitly prohibited in boathouse roofs under this zoning bylaw. Here is how height is normally calculated for a boathouse. There's your 3.6 meter eave line, your median level at 6.7 meters. You get 50% above, 50% below, which takes you to 32 feet, 2 inches. Or if you drop your eave line, you get the corresponding increase in height at the ridge. So if you dropped it to 9'1", you could have 34 feet, 2 inches as a matter of right. And if that was a typical house, that would be a 3-story house. But the bylaw will refer to it as a 1.5 story. So let's refer to that quickly. The maximum height of the highest main roof eave is 3.6 meters. And this definition of half story, and I find myself in a really unique position here. I have never had to request a minor variance from a definition. But that is where I find myself in this very unique position. And this definition takes a little while to understand, but I'm going to paraphrase it in saying, when you have an upper story, the enclosing walls of that upper story cannot be more than 4 feet tall, where they meet the roof line, which also encloses that habitable space. So when this bylaw was written in 2006, what it was trying to stop was this. And Taylor has said this to me. The previous 2 heads of planning have said this to me. We're trying to stop the wedding cake boathouse. And that is where you clearly have a first story, you clearly have a second story, and you clearly have a roof on top of that. Hence the wedding cake boathouse. And this was a time prior to 2006, coming out of the 80s. There aren't a lot of boathouses that were built, like historic boathouses that were built on the top of Lake Joe. It was an area that really wasn't settled much before the kind of 1960s, 70s. And then we saw some really bad architecture happening in the 80s. I think we all remember that. And perhaps that the zoning bylaw was a reaction to it. So the zoning bylaw's intent was something like this. A boathouse that does appear as a 1-story boathouse. The second story here is contained within a roof line. The roof line is 3.6 meters, 360 degrees around the boathouse. And we have dormers on all 4 of the roof planes, not exceeding 50% of the roof. So this complies with the intent of the zoning bylaw. But I need you to put yourself in my shoes for a sec, to put yourself into the shoes of the architect. Because what happens when you unpack this is, here is our 36 by 36 foot base. We've got 2 typical 12-foot wide boat slips. And then on that 36 by 36 base, we put our 4-foot enclosing walls, and those 4-foot enclosing walls are enclosing 645 square feet of habitable space, or 60 square meters. Great, good to go. There's our roof. Very much what that image I showed you looked like. It is going from our walls, resting on our 4 feet high enclosing walls, and heading to the peak. Here's our first problem, is that the Ontario Building Code, particularly section 9.5.3.1, has very strict requirements for allowable ceiling heights in habitable spaces and bedrooms. This design, as it stands, with just the roof, 47% of that floor area meets the OBC requirement, where the OBC states 50% is required for a bedroom, 75% is required for living space. So this by itself is an attic. It's not permitted to be habitable by the building code. Your building department cannot issue a building permit for habitable space in this. Now, the logical thing to do would be to do a Dutch gable. Beautiful historic roof design, but automatically this doesn't work because this would be counted as a dormer. It exceeds 50% of the roof line resting on the 4-foot enclosing wall, therefore not permitted. So we pick up dormers, and these dormers, this is not done for architectural style. These are 20-foot wide dormers on a 40-foot wide roof line. So they're 50% of the roof line. They are resting on the 4-foot high enclosing wall, and they're on all 4 sides. Now, what that produces inside is there is our habitable floor space that meets the Ontario Building Code. Now, we also have to put a stair in because obviously we need to be able to get in and out of this habitable space. And the Ontario Building Code also has minimum height requirements for stairs. So the only place the stair can go is straight down the middle underneath the ridge, or we could turn it 90 degrees and you'd be walking into the boat slip. So obviously it has to stay in the middle there. Now, the habitable space, it's 2.3 meters over at least 75% and a clear rate of 2.1 meters at any point over the required area. So if we again unpack this, we have a habitable space with a stair that's only 66%. So with a stair, even though we can get into this space, it's not compliant with the Ontario Building Code. Habitable space without stair is good, 76%, but you can't get in and out of the space, so that obviously doesn't work. And the bedroom space with the stair is 66%, so over the 50, we're good. Here's our next problem. The Ontario Building Code also requires that egress windows or doors for bedrooms requires direct access to the exterior via a door on the same level or at least one window with a maximum sill height of 1 meter, which is 3 feet 3 inches. We've got 4-foot high enclosing walls all the way around, so obviously that doesn't work. So in order to comply, we either have to create a reverse dormer. We have to drop that dormer down so that this window is 3 foot 3 inches above the floor and meets the egress requirement. Or we leave our dormers as they are and we put in a really big dormer with a door. Now you'll go back to your dormer definition and realize that a dormer said nothing about doors. It specifically said it sit on top of the roof. For all intents and purposes, this one with the door is a reversed dormer. It is not permitted under your zoning bylaw. And if it's not a reverse dormer, it's a contiguous wall height going from the water level up to 32 feet high, which also would not be permitted because these eaves at 32 feet high exceed the 11-foot eaves that you're allowed to have in the zoning bylaw. So here's a lot of boathouses. These are all post 2006, and you'll see they've got reverse dormers all over them because you've got to be able to get out of the spaces. Reverse dormers onto French balconies, onto sun decks, onto little balconies at the end of a roof line. Pretty typical. And as far as I know, none of these require minor variances for these, at least not that I could find in the zoning bylaw. So right from the get-go, and this is the 4th boathouse I've done in Seguin. This is the 10th project I've done in Seguin. And I've done this work around with Steve Stone before, and I was like, please explain to me your zoning bylaw because I can't make it work. So the first workaround was, what if we only had 2 roof planes? Therefore, we would only have to have 2 enclosing walls at 48 inches, 4 feet on either side. And we create these nice big open gable ends. We get our 75% floor area. We have a door at either end, and we're running the full 36 feet depth of the boathouse. Everything looks good. We're still at our 32-foot height. But we're only at 25 feet 5 width to make this appear like a single structure. So the next workaround was to say, okay, let's take that same idea, rotate it into a cruciform plan. And for any of you who are boating on Lake Joseph, you will immediately recognize this boathouse because it is all over Seguin Township on the north end of Lake Joe. It satisfies our 4-foot enclosing walls. There they are at 1. 2, we've got our 11-foot 10 eave lines on all 4 corners where the main roof planes come down. We have our 21-foot high median height of our roof planes. We get our 645 square feet of enclosed space. So it looks like we're all good. We comply with the Ontario Building Code. What's not to love? We then move on and go, well, hold on a second. That's not the case. First of all, these things in red, by the definition of an eave, those are eaves. And they range from 11-foot 10 inches high at the bottom, all the way up to the 32-foot 2 height. These are routinely approved all the time, never requiring minor variances. Now, these guys in the corner, these are not the enclosing walls. They're not enclosing any space at all. The space that, or the walls that enclose the space of the habitable area are these walls that I show in red, which are 9 feet 8 inches high, and the entire wall of the gable. There's no other way of looking at it if we are going strictly to the intent of the zoning bylaw. So these walls go up to 32 feet high, create cathedral ceilings 18 feet tall in these boathouses as a matter of routine. Here they are. Here's 12 of them. These are just up the east side of Lake Joseph, below and above the subject property. And you can see they all are doing the exact same language. And if you look at all these doors, those doors are either standard 7'4" or more likely, those are 8-foot high patio doors. So it gives you a sense of just how big these structures are. And sorry, I'm going to kind of keep moving along. And when architects try to have fun with them and work within the zoning bylaw, this is some of the kind of things they produce. And you can see the massive ceiling heights that are created in here. And some of them, this one I love, they dropped the soffit line so low so they could get this crazy high cathedral ceiling inside, which looks somewhat cartoonish. And this is just to show that you're still building these today. This one, I took this picture last weekend. It's under construction as we speak. So I also want to turn your attention to this boathouse. This is just north of the subject property at 91 Topajo. It was built a couple of years ago, and you can very clearly see it has two dormers, both with big patio doors. And you can very clearly see that's a recessed dormer. This boathouse did not require a minor variance for recessed dormers, but here it is. I want to know where the 4-foot high enclosing walls are of this boathouse. I have a sneaking suspicion they're hidden underneath these eaves on the corners, out of sight, out of mind. You can't see them from below. You cannot see them from
Excuse me, Mr.
above.
Smith.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, and I appreciate the detail, but could you, we're not really needing to review, past buildings too much, but if you could please skip to
Okay.
the heart of the variances.
I will, because I'm getting, this is to the heart of the intent of the zoning bylaw. So again, looking at the interior here, you can see all of the interior enclosing walls are above 9 feet. So in conclusion on the test of does this application conform to the intent of the zoning bylaw, this is our application on the left. This is what is typically approved as of right with this zoning bylaw. Compared to what is routinely approved, we're 33% shorter. In our worst exposure, we have a 44% smaller silhouette than this boathouse does. We're 30% less cubic volume. We have 23% less exposed wall area on the upper floor. And we both have the same allowable floor areas, and we're OBC compliant. This is what it looks like from the other side, from the southeast corner. It's a very diminutive boathouse, quite modest by comparison to what is routinely approved without minor variances. The last test is, does it comply with the official plan? And the kind of key policy aspects of the official plan here is that the design of new buildings should achieve a complementary design relationship to existing buildings while accommodating a diversity of architectural styles. And similarly, that it should preserve the historical architectural characteristics of the area. And since there aren't a lot in Seguin, I'm going to say Muskoka in general. So there are 45 boathouses on the north end of Seguin Township. I would say they largely all look the same. So in terms of being complementary to one another, it kind of gets an 8 out of 10. In terms of accommodating a diversity of architectural styles, there's not a lot of diversity here. There's basically 2 prototypes. And these are not prototypes that are designed by architects. To be specific, these are designs that are produced by your zoning bylaw. That's why they all look the same. And then in the context of respecting historic boathouse architecture, these are 45 examples. You'll notice some of these are paintings from Jacqueline Carroll's amazing Muskoka Boathouse book. Some of you might have. These are 45 examples of historic boathouses, none of them grand, all built by largely very wealthy people at the time. There's not a single one of these 45 boathouses that can be designed using Seguin Township's zoning bylaw. They don't comply. And to me, that's a shame. So in summation, variances 1 and 4, which were for length, and for the dormer, staff is recommending approval. I recommend approval. I'm hoping that you'll just take that at our words. For variances 2 and 3 taken together, both meet the subjective and qualitative meaning of the term minor. They are smaller, they are shorter, they are less mass, etc. Are they appropriate for the developments of the lands? Absolutely. I believe staff erred here. This is a 2-story boathouse, or 1.5-story boathouse, if you want to call it that. That is what this property was zoned for. It is acceptable. Therefore, it is appropriate for the development of the lands. With respect to the intent of the zoning bylaw, while recognizing its flaws, and again, I do need to point out that the zoning bylaw, it's very, very difficult to produce a design that actually complies with the Ontario Building Code. So while we have done this, we've proposed a boathouse design that is in every way less than boathouses that are routinely approved under this zoning bylaw. And I believe that this proposal respects the intent of the official plan by producing a design that represents much needed architectural diversity while blending into nature as best a boathouse can, and in respecting its neighbors, neither of which have objected to our application and for which we have reviewed the application with them. So in conclusion, by approving these variances, there are no adverse effects. There are no real or potential impacts to neighbors, to the traveling public, or to the township. And in that, I thank you for your time, and I request that these variances in their entirety are minor and that they be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for a very thorough presentation. I will turn it over now to committee for discussion. Comments from committee members? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Smith. I appreciate being schooled on the zoning bylaw. My question is, obviously, you're very experienced in planning, and obviously there are two ways to make this application. One is through the zoning bylaw amendment presented to council, and one is through, which is your right, to make it through a committee of adjustment for what is considered a minor variance. I do know that the building code and the act in regards to minor variances is very vague, and it does give a big swing. And my question is, did you consider, or why was this not brought forward as a zoning bylaw amendment to council?
I spoke at length with planning staff, with Taylor and Brady, and it was recommended that these be brought forward as minor variances. While I do appreciate that the township often will group them together as a zoning amendment, staff is quite adamant that minor variances do not create precedent, and therefore the more preferred and common zoning amendment wasn't opted for, and I was okay with that.
Thank you. My concern, Mr. Chair, is that this is in fact an application for a two-story boathouse. I respect, and Mr. Smith, you make very good argument in regards to the reason for submitting the plans the way that you did. But I feel that this is not a minor variance when the intent is to overturn or supersede the zoning bylaw. I respect that you have problems with the zoning bylaw in Seguin, but I think that me personally, I do not see this as a minor variance. I see it as a zoning bylaw, a zoning amendment. And while I do understand, and I appreciate your explanation because it did make it clearer in regards to variances 1 and 4, I think myself personally that the application has to be looked at in totality. And I think picking out 1 and 4 would not do it justice for me. So thank you for answering the questions.
Thank you, Greg. I believe we have Mr. Elgie wishing to speak from the planning department. Taylor?
Thank you. I just want to know one small thing, and maybe Graham and I got our wires crossed, but I do recall speaking on the phone and recommending that I think this would be more appropriate as a zoning bylaw amendment. We would never insist on something being submitted as a minor variance if we knew we were going to reject or recommend a refusal because it is not minor. So there could have been a miscommunication, but I do agree that this would have been more appropriate as a zoning bylaw amendment. That being said, it could still be a challenging application before council as well. So I don't want to give any false assurances to the applicant in that regard.
Thank you, Taylor. Other committee members? Yes, Wib.
I agree with not approving the application for the reasons that planning staff have given. There's also something on the table here that possibly it could be deferred, but I don't think that's really going to accomplish anything. So, but we could do that. But I wouldn't be in favor of voting for all four variances. So that's where I'm at.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to put my hand up.
I believe you just did. If you could, you would ask through me to speak, please, but I believe I will recognize Mr. Getty first.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that the staffing report recommends approval of section 1 and 4 and a refusal of 2 and 3. I would put forward a motion to amend the application or the proposal that they not be separated, that it be all of the conditions or none of the conditions, but they not be voted on separately. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. I believe that would be the standard way to deal with it. I don't think we deal with half resolutions. It's either a new resolution or the standing resolution. Mr. Smith, you had a comment?
The discussion whether applying as a zoning amendment or applying for minor variances, I think it's somewhat of a moot point because we're going to be talking about the exact same thing. What I would, and what I was hoping to draw your attention to in my presentation, is that in approving boathouses across Seguin Township, there have been a number of kind of exemptions and exceptions and workarounds that are very, very common. And I have a difficulty in overlooking routinely approved aspects that don't require minor variances when clearly they do, and then bringing something before council that is being identified as a 2-story boathouse when it is 9 feet shorter than what is referred to as a 1.5-story boathouse. It seems to defy common sense and reason.
Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, we have to continue on with the meeting. I
Please.
will ask for, we understand your points. Thank you. You've presented it well. We will deliberate, and I think we have any other comments from committee? Mr. Lenyock, please go ahead. You're on mute, Len, if you could unmute, please.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
That much of in the outline or the criteria established here, it says that if you can't create a solution by massing, go to height. And it seems that that's what's happened in the past. Lots of height. It also asks for diversity. And as Mr. Smith pointed out, there isn't much diversity. I wondered if that roof was turned around and you looked at it in a different way and it would look like a 1.5 stories, would we say, oh, it's all right? I guess that's the question that I would have to, I'm asking myself, because I agree in many instances, we have approved some fairly significant height exceptions.
Okay, thank you, Len. So I think we have to look at the resolution that's in front of us and the application that is in front of us. And I believe we do have to consider it as presented with the 4 different variances. So I think at this point, Mr. Smith, hearing our conversation, do you wish to perhaps defer this and look for a more positive approach, or would you prefer that the committee vote on the 4 conditions as they are?
It's
four variances.
it's an interesting question. If we were to defer, to make this boathouse comply, I would need to make that top curve come back down to 3.6 meters. That would satisfy it, despite the fact that the east and west eaves are still at full height, which for some reason they're allowed to do that. It would look silly. It literally, unless I design exactly the way you see everything else on Lake Joseph, if you're designing to the zoning bylaw, that's what it produces. You can't do something that's different. You can't do something that's diverse. You can't do something that's good. They all look the same because your bylaw dictates they'd be the same. And I would challenge this committee to look at these boathouses. And how are they not two-story boathouses? They're all two-story boathouses. They're 6 feet taller than what's permitted in Township of Muskoka Lakes.
So yeah, again, I think it's not this committee's mandate to change the zoning bylaws. We heard to consider your application under the existing zoning bylaws, and you know, if it was brought up that perhaps a zoning bylaw amendment might be a better approach for this, so I am giving you a little bit of room here to give us your preference. Do you wish us to vote on this application as is, or do you wish to
I
choose
think
another path?
I think you have to vote on the minor variance application as is. There would be no point in deferring this. If we bring it forward as a zoning bylaw amendment, we're obviously going to have to figure out a way to change the boathouse design, which, as I pointed out, isn't really terribly possible. So I'm disappointed that we can't do something new and interesting in the township. And that doing something smaller somehow makes it bigger. It just makes little sense to me. So as I said, if this is the mindset of committee, there's no point in deferring this application.
Okay, I believe we have Mrs. Forte. Did you wish to speak?
I was just wondering about the implications of doing a vote now versus deferring versus doing an application for a zoning amendment. And, you know, does the decision that's made now prejudice us from doing something different, or do we still have all options available to us?
I will ask either Taylor or Brady, perhaps from planning, to give you that answer. Taylor, go ahead, please.
The thought or the staff recommendation behind the deferral was to avoid an outright refusal. So if there was any flexibility in the plans or something to help mitigate some of the concerns raised, you could come back with maybe a plan B or try to meet in the middle or compromise on some of the matters noted. However, if you're pretty committed to your design and you don't want to change it, there's not really much sense in deferring it if that's kind of where your will lies. If you are going to proceed with this design to council through a zoning bylaw amendment, I would recommend that a decision be finalized on the application in front of committee today, because it wouldn't be beneficial to any party to have this application open while the exact same request is also going to council concurrently. I could just see that being complicated and have some loose ends. That's all I have to really offer in that regard.
And if the vote takes place today and the vote is no, then that's it. There's no appeal. Can we come back with a modified design? I don't even know if that's possible. I mean, the original design that we looked at to comply with the bylaw, it did look like a mushroom. If we want to have a curved roof, the same as the main building, I can't even conceive of what a boathouse is going to look like. It's not going to match the main. And so all the effort that we've put into the design, I mean, that's all lost now as far as I can see. And if voting on this now and the answer is no, and that closes the door, I feel like I'm at ground zero and I start all over again, and I don't want that.
Thank you, Mrs. Forte. Taylor, any other comments?
I guess through you, Mr. Chair, I believe she asked kind of what the next steps could be. If if committee denies the request today, you would have the right to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So there is an appeal opportunity for the proponent of minor variances. However, you also mentioned future flexibility or changes. If you are looking to do that, you would have to keep the application open, which is the deferral. So, yeah, essentially those are kind of the two options, or a decision, and you could apply through a zoning bylaw amendment as well, which is an entirely different stream.
And what would be the process if we need to close this process before going for a zoning change? What would be the process for, would we meet again, be put on the next agenda kind of thing, and you know, show you a revised plan that may be lesser? I'm having a hard time getting my head around the fact that this is major, that it's not minor when you look at the pictures and the size of the proposed boathouse versus the standard boathouse that's being built nowadays. But if we could tweak the design to be more of a compromise, maybe it wouldn't look as good, but it might be closer to what the committee could approve. I mean, my preference is to keep this open.
Okay, I will ask you then to make that decision, whether you wish a deferral or wish a vote.
If we defer, Taylor, if we don't defer, we would come back at you with a brand new application for a different boathouse design. This application would be abandoned and we would start from scratch.
Through you,
Correct?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. Either you do that through, I would suggest a zoning bylaw amendment, or the other opportunity is appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal.
But we could also try to do something that's somehow compliant, and come back for another minor variance if one is required.
That's also an opportunity as well, yes. Although I would say if you have an idea of a compromise or something to meet some of the concerns you heard today in the back of your mind, I think a deferral would be the wiser opportunity, because you wouldn't have to start entirely from scratch. So I would agree with the chair that, sorry to put you guys on the spot, but.
Well, the difficulty, you know, the design, you've seen it. In order to comply, I have to go to crazy steep high roofs. There's no other way around it. That's why I have walls that are tall inside, but all of the other boathouses do too. And I feel I'm being caught in a zoning bylaw that doesn't function. And I'm embarrassed to say that that the township has approved designs for boathouses that don't comply with the Ontario Building Code. And I know this because 2 of them were mine. And we were working to try to work with this zoning bylaw, and it produces the same thing over and over again. So I'm going to come back to you with a boathouse that looks like every other boathouse, because that's what your bylaw produces.
Okay, so
The only
again,
way you can. So I don't know, like deferring it, I'm going to come back with a standard boathouse design. I can't bring this design back to you without requiring a variance, because it's simply not possible. And that's a shame. So I don't, Lindy.
I'd rather keep it open. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't sound like this is going to be approved, and we have to redesign. So I don't see the advantage in closing this now.
We're redesigning either way.
Right.
So we might as well let you guys pass judgment on this so that we've got finality, and starting a new application isn't a big deal. We'll be back at committee if we have to be, in a month or so. I would actually prefer to put this to the test and have this struck down.
so
Almost
sorry
because I
to
want a
interrupt.
record of that.
Yeah, we do have to keep moving. I will make perhaps one other option, and if you do defer, you still have the choice of withdrawing if you don't want to keep going with this and still start over.
Closing a door.
You can defer it, and then if you don't find a way and you rather go to zoning bylaw amendment or then at least you still have that option. If we vote on it, then you're starting over either way.
Lindy, would you like to defer?
I would.
Okay,
Okay,
then we request a deferral.
then I will quickly draft a motion to defer this for further discussion with planning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just give me 2 minutes, folks. Number A. Okay, so I will just read the draft resolution that the committee will defer application number A-2024-0015H to further discuss options for a compliant plan with Seguin Planning Department. So I'll just going to add here so that the applicant. Okay, so I will go ahead and read this then. So I need a mover and seconder. So moved by Lee, seconded by Wibb. That the Committee of Adjustment hereby defer application number A-2024-0015H so that applicant may further discuss options for a compliant plan with the Seguin Planning Department. All in favor? And carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, folks, and realize this is a complicated one for you, but hopefully the process will work for you.
Correct. So the application's been deferred, so please reach out to planning staff following the meeting to discuss further steps.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I will ask the Secretary Treasurer to introduce our next application, please.
The purpose of minor variance application A-2024-0013-F for Cordon is to construct a cottage addition. The applicants are requesting a variance for the interior side yard setback and rear yard setback. No formal correspondence has been received.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Who do we have, if anyone, to speak to this application? Yes, Mr. Cordon, if you could approach the stand, please, and I believe there's a touch button on the microphone.
Okay. I don't really have much to say. Actually, I believe staff has recommended acceptance, so I'll leave it with you to discuss if there is anything at all to discuss. And if there's any questions for me, I can certainly answer them.
Okay, thank you. If you want to perhaps just stand there for a moment in case there are questions from the committee. So I will turn it over to committee. Wibb, please go ahead.
If you know who your neighbor is on the side that is encroaching, and if you've spoken to those people and if they're okay with it, or where you're at.
We actually don't know the neighbors. It's vacant land, and so we don't know anybody, like we don't know anything from those people.
Okay, I guess you're going to move the septic anyway, so.
Yeah.
That'll help. And I'm sure they were notified of the application, so they're not here banging on the table, so I guess
right.
they must be somewhat similar
Mm-hmm.
to agreeing to it anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Cordon? Okay, well, thank you, sir. Then I will call for a mover and seconder to bring the resolution forward. Moved by Greg, seconded by Lee. That the Seguin Committee of Adjustment hereby approve variance application A 2024 0013 F for Cordon to construct a cottage addition and request the following variances to zoning bylaw 2006-125. Section 6.3, table 6.2 for interior side yard setback, maximum permitted is 5 meters, proposed is 1.3 meters for a variance of 3.7 meters. For rear yard setback under section 6.3, table 6.2, maximum permitted is 10. The proposed is 6.7 for a variance of 3.3 meters. Subject to the following conditions, the extent of the variance will generally conform to that shown on the sketch plan submitted in the application, and the owner will apply for and obtain the required building permit for the cottage addition within 3 years of the date of decision of the Committee of Adjustment. All in favor? And carried.
Perfect. The application has been approved. You'll get a letter in the next few days notifying you of the 20-day appeal period starts now.
Okay, Mr. Cordon, you're welcome to stay or carry on as you wish. I will ask the Secretary Treasurer to introduce our third application for Robinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of minor variance application A-2024-0016-H for Robinson is to construct a garage. The applicants are requesting a variance to building height for an accessory structure. No formal correspondence was received.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is anyone representing this application? Good. Okay, very good. If you could take the stand and turn on the mic, please.
There we go. Okay. I don't have any extensive presentation to explain all the things we're looking for. The average height conforms to the building zoning bylaw, but it was through preview with your planning committee or planning team that it's declared a shed roof, and as a shed roof, it has a maximum height. So what we want to do is come to for the variance of 1.29 meters, a little over almost 4 feet, to increase the maximum height on the roof.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robinson, Mr. Andrew Robinson, anything to add?
Hi, how are you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. My wife did a fantastic job. Thank you very much. The design is unique, and obviously it's a shed roof, so a little bit more restrictions. We like the design from the what it provides us with regards to storage of our taller boats, and also a future plan of solar array on top of the roof. So it's met in one part's facing south and one part's facing north. So it's going to capture what we need in the future with regards to our solar plan. And we like the design, and that's it. No more than that.
Yeah, interesting idea. Thank you. Committee members, any comments, questions? Okay. Mr. Yock is temporarily away. Okay, yeah, you're good. Thank you. Unless you have anything to add. Yeah.
Sorry about
All right.
that.
Well, Len, we're just about to read.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just got.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. Any further questions on this one?
No.
No. Okay. Then I will go ahead and look for a mover and seconder, please, to bring this forward. Moved by Greg, seconded by Whip. That the Committee of Adjustment hereby approves variance application A-2024-0016-H for Robinson to construct a garage and requests the following variance to zoning bylaw 2006-125 under section 4.1.4 building height accessory structure. Maximum permitted 4.5 meters, proposed is 5.79 meters for a requested variance of 1.29 meters. The extent of the variances will conform to that shown on the sketch plan submitted in the application, and the owner will apply for and obtain a building permit for the garage within 3 years of the date of decision of the Committee of Adjustment. All in favor? And carried.
The application has been approved. You will get a letter in the next few days notifying you of the decision, and the 20-day appeal period starts now.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good luck with your project, folks. You're welcome to stay or carry on.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, if you could read the next application, which is Reed.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of minor variance application A-2024-0017-H, Reed, is to construct a detached garage with an upper story guest cabin. The applicants are requesting a variance to building height for an accessory structure, maximum guest cabin floor area, and the definition of a half story. Correspondence in support of the application was received from Eric Reed and Sue and Doug Gunton.
Okay, who do we have representing this application? Do you wish to speak to us?
It's Brian Reed, and nothing particular to add. I understand it's been recommended and strangely similar to the previous applicants. It's a shed roof that is kind of the cause of the variance, and it's fairly self-explanatory, so I'll just be here if questions are required.
Okay, yes, thank you, Mr. Reed. Yeah, just stand by. Turn it over to committee for comments, questions. Len, any issues on this one?
No.
No, okay, then I will ask for a mover and seconder, please, to bring this forward. Moved by Greg, seconded by Lee. That the Committee of Adjustment hereby approve application A-2024-0017-H for Reed to construct a detached garage with an upper story guest cabin on the subject lands. The following variances to zoning bylaw 2000. Under section 4.1.10C, maximum guest cabin floor area permitted is 60 square meters, proposed is 66.1 square meters for a variance of 6.1 square meters. And definition of half story, permitted is 1.2 meters, proposed is 3.3 for a variance of 2.1 meters. Subject to the following conditions. The extent of the variances will generally conform to that shown on the sketch plan submitted in the application. And number two, that the owner applies for and obtains a building permit for the garage and guest cabin within 3 years of the date of decision of the Committee of Adjustment. All in favor? And carried.
The application has been approved. You will get a letter in the next few days notifying you of the decision, and the 20-day appeal period starts now.
Thank you.
Moving on, Madam Secretary, who's next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of minor variance application A-2024-0014-H Dinsmore is to construct a cottage addition. The applicants are requesting a variance for maximum lot coverage within the first 60 meters of the shoreline and a reduction for minimum interior side yard setback. No formal correspondence was received.
Okay, a little small, but it looks like Savas from Plan Muskoka is here.
Yes, thank you. My name is Savis of Plan Muskoka, PO Box 534, Huntsville, Ontario, P1H2K7. I'm here representing the Dinsmore as their agent, and I'm a registered professional planner. Ms. Dinsmore, I can see, is also present digitally as well too. I don't have a lot to add. I can say that this, I've read the staff report pretty closely, and I agree with their recommendation for the approval of this application. I think the great thing about this property is that the addition is pretty modest, only 39 square meters is being proposed. And it's got a very thick vegetative buffer along the shoreline. So the cottage itself right now is pretty well hidden from view, but the addition is sort of located sort of to the rear corner of it, and it would be almost completely hidden from view. So I think the property can support the additional lot coverage. And again, I agree with staff's recommendation for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions that are that I can. And if the Dinsmores want to add anything, I think now's the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Savas. Mr. and Mrs. Dinsmore, anything to add?
We have nothing to add. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. We'll turn it over to committee for questions and comments. Okay, Len, do you have anything?
No,
to
I
say on this
enjoyed
one?
reading the report. It certainly refreshed all of the things you have to look for in looking at variances. Thank you.
Okay, last call for questions, comments. Mover and seconder, please, to bring this to vote. Moved by Lee, seconded by Wibb. That the Committee of Adjustment hereby approve variance application A-2024-0014-H for Dinsmore to construct a 39 square meter cottage addition on the subject lands. The following variances to zoning bylaw 2006-125 are being requested. Section 6.3, table 6.3, column 2, maximum lot coverage within 60 meters of the shore permitted is 7.5%, proposed is 11.2%. There is 9.9 existing for a variance of 3.7% or 1.3 from existing. Section 6.3, table 6.2, interior, minimum interior side yard setback 5 meters, permitted, proposed is 4.5 meters for a variance of 0.5 or half a meter. Subject to the following conditions, the extent of the variance will generally conform to that shown on the sketch plan submitted with the application, and that the owner applies for and obtains the required demolition permits for the shed and covered barbecue structure and a building permit for the cottage addition within 3 years of the date of decision of the Committee of Adjustment. All in favor? And carried.
The
Thank you.
application has been approved. You'll get a letter in the next few days notifying you of the decision, and the 20-day appeal period starts now.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Yeah, take care. Thank you. Any other business for the committee? There was an item about expense reports for second quarter.
Just make sure you submit your expense sheets for April, May, and June, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anything else, anyone? Then I will look, I gotta remember to look at the screen. Len, anything? You good?
No, adjourn.
Okay, thank you. Then mover and seconder, please, for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Lee, seconded by Greg. That the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adjourn this hearing at 5:03 PM on Wednesday, June the 12th, 2024. The committee will hold its next hearing at 4 PM Wednesday, July 10th, 2024, or at the call of the chair, unless the Secretary Treasurer has not received complete applications for committee consideration. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, folks.